Yeah.
Back then.
Yeah, and so at this point, I'm still very scared for him, and I'm still very terrified. So we're starting to think about colleges and things like that. So now all this is on my radar. So now I want him to go places where I know he would be more at home. So we were looking at all the schools in New York and places like that. And yeah, there were some great schools that he got into that were probably in some more rural areas, but I had some real concerns about him going to some of those not so metropolitan large areas and being LGBTQ. And so we focused on schools in New York, schools in New York. There were some phenomenal schools in New York. And so that's kind of where we put our focus. And I never said because I want you to feel at home or I want you to be comfortable, but that is what was on my radar. Those are the things that I was concerned about. His safety, him being accepted, him feeling loved, me not having to, drive to some college and, fight everybody every week because, it's kind of, you know, what a mother does, a mama bear does for her cubs. So if they're in danger, so we zoomed in on New York, and that was what we decided that he should go to school in New York,
And that's what
which
I
was
wanted.
his first choice.
That's what I had
Anyway,
always wanted.
yeah, that was his first choice. So it wasn't because he was LGBTQ. That's what he's always said. He wanted to go to school in New York. That was one of our happy places. We spent a lot of time there as a family. And so he loved New York. He always did. And he always felt at home there. And so we knew that that was the right fit for him. So all the pieces kind of came together. But let's talk a little bit about, because I want other parents who are probably in the earlier space where maybe they haven't had the conversation or they haven't come to the point of acceptance. Do you have any advice? I'll tell you what I let me tell you as a parent my advice, and then I'll let Stephen share what he thinks. As a parent, the best thing you can do is love your child. And so I know the things you worry about are how embarrassed you're going to be, oh, what this is going to do to your standing in the community, whatever organizations you're a part of, what people are going to think about you or think about your family. None of that matters. None of it matters. What matters is the relationship that you have with your child, how you make your child feel throughout this process. And yes, it's going to be difficult in the beginning. It's going to be hard traveling that road to acceptance, but I promise you, it gets better. The more dialogue you have, the more you talk about it. Now, one of my best friends in the world is my sister, and she is very enlightened, so to speak. So I had many, many conversations with her because she, helped me to move to acceptance. She would tell me, "You're just being ridiculous. What difference does it make? Who cares?" Da, 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 da. And all those things. And she was right. It didn't matter. None of it mattered because you know what? The truth of the matter is, this is one of the most amazing. I mean, everybody thinks their kids are amazing. Both of mine are. Both of my kids are amazing, and both of them are phenomenal. But knowing that my biggest concern is that he's LGBTQ, that was a small thing because he was one of the most amazing human beings that I had ever met in my life. And I was so blessed to have him as a son, to have my daughter as my daughter. They are phenomenal human beings. And whatever they are, whatever they turn out to be, or whatever choices they make, the choices are theirs to make. And my job as a parent, and your job as a parent, if you're listening to this and you're dealing with this, is to just help them navigate and get to, or if they don't already, feel good about who they are and what life has to offer them. And so that was my experience. As I said, it was very, very challenging in the beginning. I had a hard time accepting it, but once I did, I was the better for it.
Yep.
Stephen, what advice would you give to parents or even children who
Yeah,
are
I would
trying to have
say
this
for
conversation?
parents, and this advice is really just in general when it comes to raising kids, when it comes to anything, You know, when you're raising children, you think that like your best advice, your best guidance, your best how to's in regards to how to walk through life are absolute, right? But when you really think about it, right, everything that you're giving them and pouring into them is advice and guidelines for how to survive in your reality, not theirs. So if you believe that life is very difficult for LGBTQ people and they're going to go through X, Y, and Z because of their LGBTQ status, that is the reality that you are creating because that's what you believe. It doesn't necessarily have to believe that that's the reality that they live in, right? So you
Mhm.
don't necessarily have to put that on them. So just remember when you're giving your kids advice on how you think reality should be run, all that really is perspective. It's not an absolute. Everybody, we talked about this the other day. Everybody is different and has a different role and path to traverse in life. And I think it's important to let people give people the grace and the freedom to your kids rather the grace and the freedom to walk those paths and become who they need to become. And it's not to say that your advice is bad or it's wrong, but it is what it is. It is your perception about how to survive in your idea of reality. And for example, my idea of reality was not this. I did not believe I was going to struggle through life because I was LGBTQ. I just didn't believe that. Yes, that's what everybody said. But again, like I don't think we talked about this yet, but I'm a very spiritual person. I have a very strong faith, and I just did not believe that that was the life that God had been preparing me for. Just like you
Mhm.
said, I was this amazing human being. I knew I was a dope human being. And I said, there's no way that I am the person that I am. I have the relationship with the God that I have, and I'm about to walk this very difficult path because I'm attracted to what I'm attracted to. I don't buy that for my reality because I am a child of the Most High. I can render the reality of my choosing. And I chose not to believe what your perception of your reality was. And like my life has not been drastically difficult
Mhm.
because of me being LGBTQ. Now, look, I will admit, and many people have told me this, people in the community have told me this, a part of that is because I identify with the B in that acronym, which means that there is some privilege to that I have to don't necessarily have to go through a lot of the sort of same level of discrimination that lesbian women and gay men have to go through because it's just one of those things where if you don't really know if you don't
Mhm.
really know me, right?
Mhm.
So there is a level of privilege there. But in general, no, it has not been very difficult. And which says to me is that like I am exactly who I was supposed to be. Um,
Yeah, that's awesome. I can tell you in the beginning, and there's some of the funny stories. And parents, I'm sharing this because I know you have these same fears. I'm thinking, oh God, I'm gonna surprise him and come to New York one day, and he's gonna be walking down the street with the dress on, and he's gonna,
which
oh
is
my
like
God.
not even.
I mean,
That's
which
a
is
completely different
fine if that
conversation.
was his journey. Yeah, if that was his journey, but that
Like
was
I know
my
straight men
biggest
who
fear.
wear I know straight men who wear
Yeah, I
dresses.
know.
Like
I said at that time though, at that time that was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? I walk out and he's got on a dress and high heels, or how am I gonna handle it? But those are all the crazy things that as a parent before you become enlightened and before you travel the road to acceptance that you deal with all the crazy thoughts, and they don't even matter. Those things are just so unimportant. But I do have another question for you.
mhm.
Talk to us a little bit about when you understood that's who you were. Like, around what age did you truly understand it? Because I can tell you, as a mother, I kind of understood it when you were very, very young, maybe as a toddler.
Well, I didn't know to the point of like really being able to wear it as this is who I really am. I didn't know how to do that until college.
Okay. Okay.
I didn't really know how to do that till college, but I knew something. I didn't know what this was when I was 6 years old, and you all signed me up for soccer, to take soccer. Um, but I'll never forget being like 6, and that first day at soccer, there was just another kid on the another dude on the team, and he was changing into his parents like had him changing into his soccer uniform. And I just remember the shirt came off, and I was like 6. He was probably like 6 too. And I just remember when the shirt came off, I became transfixed, like very similar to how I would become transfixed as a child when I heard Whitney Houston's voice.
Mhm.
And I never forget that. I was always like, what is that?
Now, but that didn't necessarily mean anything. I mean, kids
No, but
oftentimes.
but what I recognized later, and because I never forgot that moment.
Oh,
Ever,
okay,
ever, ever,
okay,
ever have I forgotten that
right,
moment for as long as I have lived. And it
okay.
wasn't until I was later, like probably in my college years, that I would think back on that and be like, oh, that was me being attracted to the same sex for the first time
Even at 6,
at
huh?
6. Yep.
Wow, okay.
hmm
How do you think other kids related to you growing up? You didn't go out and play with a lot of kids in the neighborhood,
not
but
till I was a little older, not until I was about 10.
okay. You feel like when you were younger, you don't feel like kids saw any difference, but
Oh no, no,
as you got older, they
kids
did.
definitely saw a difference.
Okay.
Kids definitely saw a difference. I guess generally what you'll find is that people who identify as LGBTQ are a bit more fluid in the way that they uh, mitigate through masculine and feminine energies. That I think that's one of our gifts, right? We have a deeper understanding, more access to both sides of that human energy, so we can live in both sides a little bit more than people who identify as heterosexual. And that is what other kids when I was very young were picking up on. Like, I'm not always doing the super masculine thing, I'm not always doing the super feminine thing, but there's always this fluidity that I can move through. There's always been this fluidity. And so again, when I was younger, look, it was a different time. So when kids were picking up on that, yeah, you get made fun of. But I did also grow up in the 21st century. And honestly, being able to flow between those two energies has made my relationships, both platonic and romantic, with men and women so much more better, because I understand my fellow human being a little bit more. Like, I understand feminine energy, so I understand women really well, and I understand masculine energy really well, so I understand men really, really well. So it really has become an asset, I would say.
So, how would you say? So, we've talked a lot about how I dealt with it. How do you think your father dealt with it?
That was a bit easier because you scared the crap out of me of telling him for years.
I scared you so that you didn't tell him?
hmm
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
How did I do that?
you just said it would destroy him.
Okay.
And that's
Okay.
another thing, parents, you have to be very careful with what you say. You have to
Okay.
be very careful with what you say to your kids when you're going through this. But you did say don't tell your
I probably
father.
was using that as a scare tactic, but that was probably a bad move on my part.
Don't tell
I,
your father, because you will
your
destroy him.
father's not the type that would scare or be destroyed by something like that. So I'm sure I was using that as a scare tactic. Like, don't do it. You're gonna destroy your father. But so
Again,
tell us
parents,
about that
don't do that.
experience.
Well, um, as often, as it often is the case, Beyonce was a big help. Um,
Beyonce, you're getting credit for things that happen in my house.
Beyonce was a big help. It was the self-titled album, and there was this song she did on that album with The Weeknd, just all about like being a confident person, right? And that song always stood out to me on that album that came out in 2013.